Hey, welcome to my Warframes Where They Are Now series, a little series I've had brewing in the back of my mind since the early days of Warframe, quote unquote. I'm going to put this little intro at the beginning of every video in this series. If you've heard this once or more, feel free to skip it. This is just my opinion and is not guaranteed to be fact. Remember, with Warframe, everyone plays at least a little different from each other. That's why there's 52 frames as of making this intro, of course. That being said, I do plan on being as objective as I can with this series. But bias will always be a potential problem, and will definitely shine through in certain episodes, if not all. Now, that being said, I hope you enjoy the series.
August 16th, 2023. This week we're talking about Limbo. Also, as a heads up, I'm sorry about the beeping in the background. There's literally nothing I can do about it. My neighbors are renovating. But either way, let's talk about the game's most confusing frame. Base stats on a level 30 Limbo Prime are 125 armor, 263 energy, 300 health, 300 shields, and 1.15 sprint speed. Limbo's passive is whenever he rolls, he actually sidesteps into the rift and leaves behind a portal that lets allies step into it as well. Energy is recuperated while you're in the rift, and killing enemies also provides you more energy while you're in the rift. As for his first ability, Banish, he sends enemies into the rift, usually a couple depending on what your range is. As for the augment, Rift Haven, allies banished to the rift will have 10% of their maximum health restored every second. Granted, that goes up as you level up the mod as well. I think the ability itself is pretty good. I probably wouldn't bother with Rift Haven, only because of tools like Vazarin and Molt Reconstruct. But it's pretty good. It's a pretty solid augment. His second ability, Stasis, does though it stops all enemies and their projectiles midair while they're in the rift, and they resume as they leave the rift. It's pretty awesome to have. Obviously, it doesn't work on Eximus until you pop their Overguard, but it is pretty helpful nonetheless. His third ability is Rift Surge. I'll be honest, I don't use this one too often, and on one of my builds I have actually straight up removed it. But effectively, any enemy that you hit with this ability after you kill them, when they leave the rift, it sends other enemies around them into the rift. It's useful, but honestly, I don't use it all that often because of how I use Limbo. I either use them to lock down an area, or I tend to try to use them in smaller quantities, and that's usually when I'm playing with people. So I don't want to trap all the enemies in the rift and have my allies not able to do shit. Unless they're running Excalibur or Garuda or something. As for the augment, Rift Torrent, Limbo does 30% extra damage to each enemy affected with Rift Surge while in the rift. I actually had a build with that for a long time, before I sat down and really learned Limbo. But it's not a bad augment, I will say. I honestly, if I had a build for research, I'd probably use it again. Alright, as for Cataclysm, this is kind of his bread and butter. He surrounds a pretty decently sized area in the rift. Any enemies that walk in are immediately in the rift, and are affected as such. This is great for a multitude of things. I will say, as counterintuitive as it is, if you're doing it for mobile defense or even just regular defense or whatever, having a small bubble can be actually more advantageous than having a big bubble. And the reason for that is, well, nullifiers. If you have a small bubble, it's a lot harder for them to get to it and, disrupt it, because they will disrupt it. However, there are advantages to also having a big bubble. For example, actually using stasis on a large scale. As well as, any other shenanigans you have going, like Rift Surge, for example. As for the augment, Cataclysmic Continuum, Cataclysm augment, duration is increased by 0.30 seconds for each enemy killed. If I had to guess at max, that's probably 1. Actually, let me go ahead and check that. Yeah, so as I thought, it increases it by 1 per enemy killed. I will say, that is actually worth fitting onto your build, especially if you're doing this for defense or mobile defense. And I'm kind of kicking myself for not thoroughly reading that, because I already have the augment, and now I'm trying to figure out a way to squeeze it into my build already. As for my build, well, that's actually kind of an interesting question. I have 2 builds that I run. My first one is entirely duration and range. Fuck strength. Mainly because, well, yes, his abilities do deal some damage. Realistically speaking, you're not going to be using him for that much. He's definitely a CC frame. And a pretty damn good one at that, once you learn how to use him. He's definitely a confusing as fuck frame. It took me way too long to really understand him. The second build I have is entirely duration and actually have negative range, as you can see on the screen. Now the reason for this is for rescue missions as well as, defense, mobile defense, as I was talking about earlier. With rescue targets, as soon as you unlock their cell, you just throw them in the rift and then run back to, the end point, and realistically speaking, nothing will kill them. Even on Steel Path. It works really fucking well, actually. I do have 5 Archon shards on him, and those are 3 for armor, because this boy is made out of glass, apparently. And I also have 2 for casting speed, and both of those are Tau Forged, because he does take forever to cast his Cataclysm in particular. But with those, it tends to be pretty bearable. So how does he fare for Duviri? Well, as you can see on the screen, he does pretty damn well. He's actually one of my favorite frames to end up with in Steel Path Duviri. I don't really care for getting him in regular Duviri. Granted, he does do pretty damn good, but he's kind of boring to play in regular Duviri because all you really have to do, at least with my build, is just cast Cataclysm, pop Cataclysm, cast Cataclysm, pop Cataclysm, and you're killing everything. So it's kind of as far as, fun factor goes in regular Duviri, but in Steel Path, he's a fucking blast. Oh my god. I love getting him for Excavation in particular, because I know that that's going to be easy if I have him for that. So as long as I get some decent weapons with him, he's a ton of fun to use. Overall, I'd say Limbo is an amazing frame that people tend to overlook, and to be fair, there are 2 good reasons to overlook Limbo. Reason 1 is he's not that good of a team player unless your team also happens to know how to use Limbo, because realistically speaking, all you'll end up doing is pissing them off. And honestly, I can't really blame them for getting pissed off, because, so all of a sudden your enemies can't die, and you're like, what the fuck's going on? But either way, aside from that, he is genuinely a confusing frame. To be honest, I don't even know if I'm playing him properly to just to put that out there. I do have fun playing it the way I'm playing it, so I'd say, even if I'm playing it wrong, fucking whatever, I'm having fun. But I'm not sure if there is a right way to play Limbo. I don't think there is when it comes to playing with other people. Although, when it's people that I know and they know that I have Limbo, usually I have to go over a couple things that he does every time we do a mission, but aside from that, we have fun. Or more accurately, I should say once per session, because I don't usually use him that often anyway, when I'm playing with other people. Well, that's it, and that's all. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.